My name is Candace McGarvey, and I had a post-viral syndrome similar to COVID 5 years ago and shared many of the symptoms and situations that COVID long haulers are facing today. I have been interacting with many of these patients and I hear a common thread. The rest of the world just doesn't get it. From your perspective, we may be reacting in an oversensitive manner, but this video is designed to help you understand where we are coming from as patients of long-haul COVID. You are probably watching this because you know a patient with COVID. Maybe it was even that patient who sent you this video of 8 things not to say. Look, please don't take offense. The thing is, we can't expect you to know what we're going through, but we want to help you understand it a little bit better. So let's review the background. We may or may not have received a positive test when we were sick, so our diagnosis may be questionable. Doctors might still be trying to tell us we're suffering from depression or anxiety, and yet we have symptoms that reflect an illness that has targeted multiple systems in our body, and we're still sick months later, even though we were active members of society before the virus. By all reasonable measurements, we should be better by now with all the laying around we've been doing, but we aren't, and we are beyond frustrated. As you are communicating with your patient, there are at least 8 phrases you may want to avoid. I will also include some alternatives that will hopefully communicate what you were trying to say in a more effective manner. Number 1, sounds like old age. We know it sounds that way to you, maybe because you have gone through the aging process, but we aged decades in a matter of weeks. And when an older person tries to relate to us by saying they are going through the same thing, we might get resentful because you had the opportunity to age in the normal, expected cycle, whereas our aging has been rapid, dramatic, and it came on without warning. A more productive statement might be, I recognize some of your symptoms because of my own aging process, but I can't begin to understand the scope of what you are feeling right now. Number 2, but you look good. This is especially true for women. We can still get ready and look normal. The problem is it takes a lot more out of us than it does for you. And since our fatigue isn't rooted in a lack of rest, you may not see it or our pain unless we let you see it. Also, many of us have lost weight through the most unfun and dangerous weight loss process ever. So this is a sick weight loss. Your patient may be skinny enough to look like a model, but let's be clear that those are typically very unhealthy standards. Instead, try saying something like, I don't know how you manage to look so good when you feel so awful. Number 3, you should try anxiety medication. With this illness, many have had difficulty with getting a diagnosis, and the tendency is for some people to assume the issues are all in our heads, since they cannot be proven with a lab test. In some cases, anxiety meds might help somewhat, but they will not likely get rid of some of our worst symptoms like fatigue or pain. That's because anxiety is not at the root of this post-viral syndrome. It is a complicating factor. So, you can try encouraging someone to take medication for anxiety or depression with hopes that it will improve their quality of life a little bit. Just explain that you know this is not the root of the problem if you're going to make that suggestion. Number 4, you can't be sick for that long. You should get a second opinion. In our culture, we have no room for unexplained illness, so people who are typically healthy assume we have just not put ourselves in front of the right doctor yet, because if we had, we would have had a solution by now. Try recognizing that a patient may be doing everything they can to recover and it still isn't enough. That would go a long way in showing you understand what is happening. So, a better response might be to try to relate to the patient's frustration with the length of this illness by saying, I'm so sorry you're still suffering so much. How can I help you get some more rest? Number 5, will you be better tomorrow? It would be so nice to plan some fun in our schedule, but we just never know what each day or sometimes each hour will bring. So try to come up with ideas to brighten our days that can be flexible or that will cheer us up no matter how our day is going. The next statement is one we're going to spend a lot more time on, because not only is it one of the more common statements we hear, it's also one of the more difficult ones to understand how it could be troublesome for a patient. And that is, well, at least you're alive. This sounds like you're trying to look on the bright side, which is normally really helpful. So here's the deal. We know we are fortunate to be survivors, but our quality of life is unrecognizable. To be honest, there are days where we wonder if it's worth it to press on because the medical establishment hasn't been able to give us any concrete hope of healing. One of the issues patients might be dealing with is grief. The psychology of grief shows that when there are multiple losses at once, what was otherwise just an unfortunate circumstance like an illness can actually become a trauma experience. Your patient doesn't need to see the inside of a hospital or have been put on a ventilator for the trauma reaction to be triggered, because even without those experiences, your patient has suffered so many losses. In the last few months, we may have lost friends and or family. They say in tough times, you learn who your real friends are and who your real friends aren't. Tribe. With the loss of friends comes the loss of our sense of belonging. That takes a toll on our self-esteem. Career, or our ability to be productive, at least temporarily. Ability to plan. From one day to the next, we don't know what our bodies will be up for, and next month is definitely a mystery. Comfort. Pain and fatigue make it difficult to just be still and remain content. Financial stability. The bills don't stop coming in while we're resting, but our income might stop. Loss of identity. This is especially true for people who were beacons of health before the virus. Loss of thinking. Academic studies show that brain fog actually results in decreased cognitive skills. Loss of energy. Everything we do reduces our level of energy, so don't be surprised if basic activities of daily living become difficult. So with all of these losses, how can you help your patient process the grief of all of them happening simultaneously? Let's look at one of the best practices for dealing with people who are grieving. There are 3 questions that provide a basis for your patient to process what is happening. So try asking these 3 questions. 1, what happened? 2, how did that make you feel? And 3, what's been the hardest part for you? Then, just listen. That first question may sound odd for this situation, but if your patient hasn't told you the whole story yet, it's a helpful exercise because it allows them to develop a macro view so they can see the forest instead of just the trees. Often, it's important to recognize patterns in our illness so we can find out what helps and what makes things worse. You can make a significant difference by helping us to identify any patterns you hear, because remember, doctors don't have any real treatment advice, so we're on our own. Okay, let's get back to our list of things not to say. Number 7, you have to push yourself a little bit and do some exercise or walking to get stronger. While this advice works in many situations, such as physical injury, this post-viral syndrome is a completely different animal. No one can predict what pushing yourself will do. For the vast majority of us who have tried to grit our teeth and push through the illness to reach a new activity level, we wound up much, much sicker than we were before. It can kick off a relapse. It's like our immune systems have been traumatized by this virus, and any indication that our immune system has something to fight against sends it into a tizzy. For many of us, especially those who aren't typically fond of taking risks, trying to just take a walk around the block can be a very scary undertaking. Again, try asking how you can help your patient get enough rest. 8. This one is the absolute bottom of the barrel comment. We're going to cover it. Everyone else I know who had it is better now. This smacks of disbelief. And if this is how you really feel, I would argue that you aren't capable of helping this patient. They don't need to be around someone who doubts their integrity. The virus affects everyone differently, and no one can predict what the average COVID patient will experience. So just believe them. They are still sick, period. Maybe your patient won't feel offended by some of these statements, but you know what would be a really productive conversation to have if they have the energy for it? Why don't you ask them if these statements bother them, and if so, why? You have my permission. Go ahead and throw me under the bus. Say, I watched a video by this random woman who said that these would be offensive to say to you, but she might be Looney Tunes. So I want to learn more about this and how it is affecting you. Would you mind telling me how these statements make you feel? Then just be ready to listen and learn. Another fantastic way to help with recovery is to make it possible for your patient to laugh. Laughter has a long list of health benefits that will literally speed up the healing process. So if you have any good movie recommendations or funny stories, share them. That will go a long way. That's it for this video. Please know that we post-viral syndrome patients really appreciate all you are doing for us. We may just be so fatigued that we don't know how to show it. If you are interested in more ways to support your patient, check out my series of tips for long-haul COVID patients to help them adjust and recover from extended illness.